Please like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps a lot. They set out to explore a hidden lava tube in Hawaii, but they never returned. David Ellison had begun to count every sunrise. Every morning over the calm blue Pacific felt like a cruel reminder that the world kept moving, while his own had stopped. He and his wife, Sarah, had come to Hawaii's Big Island, not for the beaches, not for the sunlight, but to stand vigil at the place where they lost their only child, a pilgrimage of grief marking the day the earth had swallowed their son. The official report said the same thing. Tragic accident, unstable terrain, unavoidable. But grief has a way of sharpening instincts, and in David's chest, a quiet, persistent voice whispered, "Something isn't right." Their son, Kalen, had always been careful, methodical, experienced with caves and volcanic tubes. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't naive. And yet the authorities insisted his disappearance inside the hidden lava tube was simply nature's cruelty. But the night before he vanished, Kalen had whispered something to David, a sentence so soft, David wondered if he imagined it. "Dad, there's something down there." David hadn't pressed him. He thought it was excitement, nervousness, the thrill of discovering a formation few humans had ever seen. Now that whisper felt like a warning. Standing at the rocky entrance of the collapsed lava tube, David exhaled shakily. The air carried the scent of damp stone and cooled volcanic ash. Sarah gripped his hand, her fingers trembling, her eyes rimmed with sleepless nights. "We don't have to do this today," she murmured. "Yes," David said softly. "We do." For the first time, they were returning to the place where their son had vanished. But this time, David wasn't here to mourn. He was here to search, to understand, to uncover what Kalen had been too afraid to say. Because deep in his heart, David knew this wasn't just a tragic accident. Kalen had been hiding something. And whatever it was, it waited in the dark below. The entrance to the lava tube yawned before them, a dark wound carved into ancient stone. It felt colder here, as if the earth itself remembered what had been taken. David switched on his headlamp. A thin beam cut into the shadows, revealing jagged rock and the narrow passage descending below. Sarah swallowed hard, her breath trembling in the still air. "I keep thinking," she whispered. "What if he called for us? What if he was waiting?" David's heart clenched. He had asked himself the same questions 1,000 times. But now, standing on the threshold, he felt something new, a pull, as if the darkness itself wanted him to come inside. They stepped forward. The world outside faded. Only the drip of distant water remained, echoing softly through the hollow stone corridor. Their footsteps crunched over volcanic debris, each sound magnified. In the tight, twisting passage, David glanced at the walls. There were markings, scratches, lines, as though someone had dragged equipment through here. He crouched to touch one, running a finger along the groove. "Kalen didn't make this," he murmured. Sarah's voice wavered. "Then who did?" He didn't answer. Instead, he kept walking, the beam of his light guiding them deeper into the heart of the earth. A faint metallic glint caught his eye. He knelt again, lifting something from the dust. A broken clip, heavy-duty, the kind used by professional cavers, not casual explorers. Sarah covered her mouth. "That's not his." "No," David said. "And look." He pointed ahead. The tunnel floor showed signs of disturbance. Boot prints, multiple sets, leading further inside. Someone had been here. Recently, the officials had claimed no one else entered the cave. They said it was too unstable, too dangerous, sealed off from the public. But the evidence beneath David's feet told another story. His pulse quickened. A mixture of dread and hope swelled within him. What was Kaylin involved in? Sarah whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. David lowered his light, staring into the narrowing darkness ahead. I don't know, he said softly. But we're going to find out. They continued downward, the air growing colder, the tunnel tightening, the weight of the mountain pressing in, and somewhere deep ahead, beyond the reach of their lights, something shifted. A soft scrape, a distant echo, as if the darkness was moving. They froze. The sound was faint, so faint it could have been imagination. But David knew the difference. This was real. Something ahead had shifted. Scraped. Dragged. Sarah clutched his arm. David, someone's down here. He wanted to agree. But another possibility, a darker one, pressed against his thoughts. Not someone. Something. They moved forward slowly, their lights trembling against the uneven stone. The tunnel angled deeper, the air growing dense and heavy, as though they were sinking underwater. A few minutes later, the passage opened into a wider chamber. Their lights swept across the walls, revealing smooth, rounded curves. An old lava bubble, its surface glistening faintly with moisture. And in the center of the chamber, half buried in dust, lay a backpack. Sarah staggered forward. That's Kaylin's. Her voice cracked. David knelt beside it, hands shaking as he brushed away debris. The fabric was torn, the zipper ripped, as if something had yanked it open in haste. Inside, he found a small flashlight, its casing cracked, a notebook soaked at the edges, and something else, a stone fragment, smooth, black, etched with grooves too straight to be natural. He turned it over. A symbol was carved into its surface, sharp and deliberate. What is that? Sarah whispered. I don't know, David said, his voice tight. But Kaylin brought it up from deeper inside. Sarah's breath caught. Why would he carry something like this? David didn't answer. He couldn't. Because suddenly, the chamber felt colder, more aware, as if unseen eyes were watching them. A soft breeze moved through the cave, though there was no opening for air. It carried a low vibration, a distant hum, almost like a voice, trying to form a word. Sarah stepped back. I don't like this. David, I want to go. But David wasn't listening. He stared at the stone, feeling its weight, feeling its wrongness. Kaylin had found something ancient, something hidden for a reason. He slipped the stone into his pack. We're close, he murmured. He came this way. Whatever happened, it started deeper. Sarah hesitated, fear trembling in her breath, but she nodded. They followed a narrow exit. On the far side of the chamber, the floor sloped sharply, forcing them to descend sideways, hands brushing the walls for balance. The hum grew louder. Not a machine, not wind, something alive, something waiting. And as they continued, the tunnel walls began to change. The natural rock, slowly giving way to carved lines, patterns, symbols. Kaylin had not been the first to walk these tunnels. Others had been here, long, long before. The deeper they went, the clearer the carvings became. No longer rough scratches, but deliberate lines, smooth curves, interlocking shapes that didn't match any writing David had ever seen. Symbols wrapped the walls, like a language made of shadows, alive with meaning he couldn't grasp. Sarah ran her fingers over one. It's warm, she whispered. That shouldn't be possible. The air is freezing. David touched the stone. She was right. The carving pulsed faintly with heat, as though the rock itself had a heartbeat. The hum vibrated again, low and rhythmic, throbbing through the floor. Sarah stepped back, breathing fast. "I think we should stop." "David, this isn't natural." "None of this is natural." He wished he could reassure her. But everything in him whispered that Kalen had followed this path. Kalen had felt this same vibration, seen these same symbols, and something had followed him. The tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a second chamber, but this one wasn't like the others. The ground was perfectly flat. The ceiling arched in smooth symmetry, too perfect to be formed by lava. And in the center of the room stood a stone pillar, tall and narrow, carved with spirals, that twisted upward like smoke. David approached cautiously. Something glittered beside it. A camera. Kalen's camera. His breath caught in his throat as he picked it up. The casing was cracked, but not destroyed. He pressed the playback screen. It flickered, struggling, then glowed. A single video file. Sarah gripped his arm. "David, don't!" But he had to. His thumb shook. As he pressed play, static filled the screen, a harsh hiss echoing in the chamber. Then Kalen's face appeared, dimly lit, his expression tense, eyes darting as if he wasn't alone. His voice came through, shaky, breathless. "If anyone finds this, don't come down here. It hears everything. The screen jolted. A crash. A scream swallowed by static. Then darkness. Sarah broke. A raw sob escaped her. As she covered her face, David stood frozen, the camera heavy in his hands. His son's fear lingered in the air, thick and choking. But something else lingered too. A presence, a shift of the shadows. Behind the pillar, a slow, deliberate scrape against the stone floor. Sarah whispered his name, but her voice was barely a breath. "David, we're not alone." He raised his headlamp, forcing the beam forward. The shadows moved. Something slid back, retreating deeper into the dark. Not crawling, not walking, but gliding, as if the darkness itself had come alive. David took an instinctive step back, his breath catching in his throat. The beam of his headlamp trembled, splintering against the far wall, where the shadow had moved. Sarah clung to his arm. "Please, please, let's leave." "Whatever happened to Kalen, whatever this place is, we're not meant to be here." But David couldn't move. Something held him in place. Not fear, not shock, but a cold certainty. Kalen hadn't simply vanished. He had been taken. The hum intensified, vibrating up through the stone floor, thudding in David's chest, like a second heartbeat. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, soft pulses of amber light spreading along the carvings. As though awakening, Sarah gasped. "What's happening?" "I don't know," David whispered. "But it's reacting to something." A sudden gust of warm air blew through the chamber, swirling dust into spirals. The pillar at the center began to vibrate, its carved spirals shimmering, as if turning beneath the stone surface. David stepped closer, drawn by an invisible pull. Sarah grabbed him. "Stop! You don't know what it will do!" He hesitated, but the warmth radiating from the pillar felt almost familiar, comforting in a way it shouldn't. He pressed his palm against it. A flash, blinding light, a jolt of heat rushing up his arm, into his chest, into his skull, and then sound. Not the hum, but a voice, not spoken aloud, but inside his mind, a whisper shaped like a memory. "Kalen." David staggered back, eyes wide, heart racing. He looked at Sarah, unable to form words. "What did it do?" she asked, trembling. "David, what did you feel?" Before he could answer, a new sound echoed down the tunnel. Heavy, slow, rhythmic, Footsteps, not human. The air thickened. The chamber dimmed, as though the darkness itself deepened. A shape appeared. At the mouth of the tunnel they'd entered from, a shifting mass of shadow. Tall, broad, its form bending and flowing, like smoke trapped in glass. Two faint lights glowed within it, pale and narrow. Eyes. Sarah choked on a whisper. "David! David, run!" But David didn't move, because the whisper in his head returned, stronger, clearer. It wasn't Kalen's voice this time. It was something older, and it was calling his name. The glowing eyes hovered in the darkness, steady, unblinking, fixed on David, as though it already knew him. Sarah tugged his arm desperately. "David, please, move!" But his body felt rooted, held by the whisper curling through his mind, a voice without breath, without shape, yet impossibly real. "Come closer." The shadowed figure shifted, its edges rippling like liquid. It wasn't walking. It wasn't gliding. It simply drifted forward, the darkness bending around it, pulling the air with a low, deep vibration. David forced himself to step back, breaking the trance. The whisper hissed in his mind, sharp and displeased. Sarah pulled him toward the far tunnel. "Run, now!" They bolted across the chamber, boots pounding the stone floor. Behind them, the shadow moved faster, its body stretching unnaturally, closing the distance with terrifying ease. They reached a narrow passage and squeezed inside. The tunnel walls scraped their shoulders, forcing them to move single file. The hum became a roar, vibrating the walls, rattling dust from the ceiling. David risked a glance back. The shadow was at the entrance, but it didn't follow. It hovered there, its outline flickering like dying flame, unable or unwilling to enter. Sarah gasped. "Why isn't it coming?" David steadied his breathing. "The tunnel is too narrow. Maybe it can't fit." But he didn't believe that. The thing didn't obey natural rules. Physical shape meant nothing to it. Something else was stopping it. The carvings. The walls of the narrow tunnel were covered in symbols, different from the others, sharper, almost protective in design. A barrier. The creature trembled at the edge of the threshold, its eyes burning with pale fury, its form pushing forward, only to recoil, as if struck. Sarah sagged in relief. "Thank God. Thank God." But David wasn't relieved. He watched as the creature slowly withdrew, pulling back into the chamber, its form dissolving into the deeper dark. It wasn't leaving. It was waiting. They pressed on, moving deeper through the tight passage, until it finally widened into another cavern. This one was smaller, its ceiling low, the air heavy with metallic scent. David lifted his headlamp and froze. On the far side of the cavern, scratched into the stone, were fresh marks. Not ancient, not weathered, claw marks, long, deep, violent. Sarah covered her mouth. "Oh, God, David, those are new." He stepped closer, heart pounding. The grooves were wide, far wider than any animal in Hawaii could make. And at the bottom of one mark, caught in a crack of stone, was a scrap of fabric. Blue, torn. Kalen's jacket. David's knees nearly buckled. He picked up the scrap, hands trembling. "He made it this far," he whispered. He was alive. "Down here." Sarah's voice broke. "Then where is he now?" Before David could answer, a sound drifted from the darkness ahead. Not a creature, not a vibration, a voice, a human voice, a single, broken whisper. "Dad?" David's heart stopped. The voice was faint, echoing through the stone, like a memory drifting on cold air. But it was real. It was unmistakable. "Kalen." Sarah froze beside him. Her breath caught in her throat. "David, you heard that, right? Tell me you heard that." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Every nerve in his body strained toward the sound. "Dad?" The whisper came again, fragile, as if carried from miles away, fading in and out like radio static. David cupped his hands around his mouth. "Kaylin! Kaylin, answer me!" His shout echoed wildly, bouncing down the twisting tunnels. He waited, desperate, ears straining, silence. Then, a soft, painful cry. "Help!" Sarah's legs buckled, and she grabbed the wall for support. "He's alive!" "Oh my God, David." "He's alive." David surged forward, but the tunnel ahead narrowed sharply into a descending slope. The floor was slick, covered in a thin layer of black dust that shifted under his boots. He swept his headlamp over the passage. The walls here were different. Dark stone streaked with faint blue veins, glowing softly, as though lit from within. The air grew warmer, thicker, and beneath it was another odor. Burnt metal, ash, something ancient. "Kaylin!" David called again. This time, the answer came sharply, as if closer. "Dad, don't—" The voice cut out, swallowed instantly by the hum that surged through the stone. Sarah covered her ears. "It's getting louder!" The vibrations pulsed harshly, as though warning them away. The symbols along the walls flickered, glowing bright, then dimming again. David pushed forward anyway. He slid partly down the steep decline, catching himself on jagged stone. The tunnel spat him out, into a cavern so vast, his light barely touched its edges. Stone pillars rose from the ground, like ribs of a giant beast. The floor dipped toward the center, forming a natural basin. And in that basin lay a circle, a perfect circle, carved deep into the volcanic rock, its edges glowing faintly blue. Symbols spiraled outward from the center, moving, shifting, as if alive. Sarah stepped beside him, her voice shaking. "What is this place?" David didn't know, but he knew one thing. Kaylin had been here. Footprints dotted the dust around the circle, some small, some larger, some not human at all. He took a step toward the basin. The hum rose violently, the air pressing against his chest, pushing him back. And then, from the other side of the cavern, a voice screamed, "Dad, run!" The scream tore through the cavern, raw, terrified, and unmistakably Kaylin's. David spun toward the sound, heart slamming against his ribs. "Kaylin, where are you?" But the cavern twisted the echoes, turning his son's voice into a maze of shadows and overlapping cries. Sarah grabbed David's arm, her voice trembling. "He said run." "David, he said run." But David couldn't run. Not now. Not when his son's voice was close enough to break the air around him. He stepped toward the basin again. The glowing circle pulsed harshly, as though reacting to his movement. The symbols shifted faster, shimmering with dangerous energy. Sarah's voice rose in panic. "David, stop! That thing, whatever it is, it doesn't want you near it!" Before he could respond, the hum dropped suddenly, falling into a deep, earth-shaking vibration. A crack splintered across the cavern floor. Then another. Stone shifted beneath their feet, dust bursting upward in choking clouds. Sarah stumbled, and David lunged to steady her. From the far shadows, a shape began to form. Not like the first creature, not liquid darkness, not smoke. This one had structure, form, limbs, a towering silhouette, its body made of jagged stone, as if carved from the cavern walls themselves. Blue veins pulsed across its surface, matching the glowing symbols on the floor. Its eyes ignited, twin streaks of searing blue. Sarah's breath hitched. "Oh, God, David, what is that?" The stone creature stepped forward, each movement grinding deep into the earth. Dust rained from the ceiling. With every tremor of its steps, it raised a massive arm, and the carvings on the walls lit up violently, as if answering its call. David shielded Sarah as a shockwave of heat rushed through the cavern. The circle in the basin blazed, its symbols spinning, pulling the air inward, like a vortex forming from nothing. And from inside that whirl of light, a shape appeared. Small, collapsed, curled on the stone floor. Callan. David screamed his name and bolted toward him. Sarah reached for him, but the wind surged, dragging her backward. As the vortex fought to pull David in, the stone creature roared, a deafening sound that shook the walls like thunder. Its arms swung downward, aimed directly at David. But before its blow could land, a burst of blue light exploded from the circle, forcing the creature back. With a crack like shattering glass, David reached the center. Sliding to his knees beside his son, Kalen's face was pale, skin streaked with ash, eyes barely open. His fingers clutched David's sleeve weakly. "Dad," he whispered, voice trembling with terror. "You shouldn't have come." David pulled Kalen into his arms, overwhelmed, shaking, barely able to breathe. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here, son. I've got you." Kalen clung weakly to his shirt, his fingers cold, trembling. His eyes darted to the glowing circle, then to the stone creature struggling to push against the invisible barrier of light. "It woke up when I touched the markings," Kalen gasped, voice thin with exhaustion. "I didn't know. I didn't know it was alive." Sarah fought her way across the cavern, pushing through the pulsing air, until she reached them. She dropped to her knees, sobbing as she wrapped her arms around Kalen. "We thought we lost you," she cried. "We thought—" Kalen shook his head weakly. "There's no time. You have to leave." The ground lurched violently, stones grinding, dust raining from above. The stone creature slammed its fists against the barrier of light, cracking it. Blue energy flickered, fading, weakening. David looked around wildly. "We can't go back the way we came. That thing will trap us." Kalen pointed to a narrow fissure on the cavern's far side, half hidden by shadows. "It leads up to another tunnel. I used it to hide." The stone creature roared again, a sound that rattled David's bones. Cracks spidered through the glowing circle, and the protective energy dimmed. It wouldn't hold much longer. David lifted Kalen carefully. The boy winced, but managed to wrap an arm around his father's neck. Sarah supported his other side. "We're getting out," she said firmly. "All of us." They hurried toward the fissure, the cavern shaking harder with every step. Behind them, the stone creature broke through the barrier with a blast of shattered light. The impact nearly knocked them off their feet. The creature lunged forward, its jagged limbs scraping the stone, its glowing eyes locked on them. The fissure narrowed into a steep crawl space. David pushed Kalen ahead, then forced himself through, Sarah right behind him. The creature slammed its arm into the rock, sending cracks racing up the walls. Dust cascaded over them as they pulled themselves along the tight passage. A massive hand thrust into the opening behind them, stone fingernails scraping inches from David's boot. "Move!" Sarah cried. "It's breaking through!" The passage suddenly widened into a sloping tunnel. Fresh air, cold, real air, brushed their faces. Kalen pointed upward. "That way, go!" David and Sarah half carried, half dragged him up the incline. Behind them, the creature forced its head into the fissure, roaring as it tried to wedge its massive body inside. But the stone was too tight. The tunnel shook violently as the creature hammered at the walls, desperate to reach them. Kalen looked back, fear flooding his face. "It won't stop, Dad. It knows we're here." David tightened his grip on his son. "Then we keep climbing," he said. "No matter what." The tunnel twisted upward sharply, forcing them to climb on hands and knees. Kalen struggled for breath, but David kept one arm around him, refusing to let go. Behind them, the stone creature's roars grew more distant, but not gone. Each bellow shook the passage, sending pebbles skittering past their hands. "It's still coming," Sarah whispered. Her voice trembled, but she kept climbing. The tunnel narrowed again, then rose into a vertical chimney of rock. A faint glow shimmered far above. "Daylight." "We're close," David said. "Just a little more." Kalen's voice was barely a whisper. "It doesn't like the light. It can't follow us outside." David didn't question how he knew. He just climbed faster. The stone warmed under their hands, sunlight filtering down in thin golden threads. Fresh air poured in, cool and sweet, filling David's lungs with hope. Then, another roar, closer this time. The creature was forcing its way through the collapsing passage. Kalen cried out, "It's breaking the tunnel! Hurry!" David shoved Kalen upward, boosting him toward the opening. Sarah climbed beside him, pulling from above as David pushed from below. The sunlight grew brighter. The roar grew louder. A massive crack ripped through the rock. Dust rained from above. A boulder shifted behind David, slamming into the tunnel wall. The creature was nearly at the chimney. "Go!" David shouted. "I'm right behind you." Kalen scrambled into the sunlight, Sarah right after him. She turned, reaching down. "David, take my hand!" He grabbed her wrist, just as another thunderous impact shook the entire chimney. The creature's jagged hand burst into view below him, clawing upward, blue veins glowing like fire. David climbed with everything he had, scraping his arms, his legs, pulling himself toward Sarah's grip. The creature roared again, its stone fingers swiping past his boots, crushing rock in its grip. "David, now!" Sarah screamed. He lunged, catching the edge with both hands. Sarah and Kalen pulled with all their strength, dragging him into the open air, just as the tunnel behind them collapsed. In an explosion of dust and shattered stone, the earth shook violently, then went still. Silence. The sun warmed their faces. Wind rustled the grass. Birds called in the distance. The creature was gone. David rolled onto his back, breathing hard, tears slipping from the corners of his eyes. Kalen leaned into him, weak but alive, alive, alive. Sarah wrapped her arms around them both, crying into David's shoulder. For a long time, none of them spoke. "Finally," Kalen whispered, voice raw with fear and awe. "It wasn't just a cave, Dad. It was guarding something ancient." David held him tighter. "It doesn't matter," he said softly. "We're done with that place." But deep beneath them, far below the earth, a faint hum stirred, as if the mountain had only just begun to wake.